Let's get more analysis and bring in Marco Vicenzino, geopolitical expert and global business advisor. Marco, thanks for being with us. We always appreciate your time here in France 24. Great to see you. Harris and Walz, in your view, a winning ticket?
Listen, with Biden, the party was resigned to defeat. With Harris and Walz, the party has a fighting chance, but it's still an uphill battle. Since Biden exited, there's been a honeymoon period for Kamala Harris. There's been optics of party unity, big rallies. She's had positive media coverage. However, and also she's re-energized the base, and on the fundraising front in July alone, they raised $310 million. But doubts still do persist. Primarily, she still remains largely undefined, untested. And people are asking, who is Kamala Harris? What does she represent? And I think, and in addition, during that honeymoon period, she never really answered any questions from the media. She refused interviews, and there were no major policy decisions except for an economic policy one recently in North Carolina that the Washington Post editorial board called a disappointment, a squandered chance. So at this convention, she has to answer those questions. Who exactly she is, what does she represent, and what does she stand for?
So it's not enough for her to keep surfing this wave of enthusiasm that you've been talking about. She needs to somehow come off that wave, get on the beach, put down the board and say, look, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm about. But in some ways, don't people know that already? She's talked about women's rights. She's talked about the things that she wants to sort of make policy issues for her about making life better for ordinary working people.
In California politics, where she was originally from, where she was a senator, she would basically, during her elections, she went from center left to far left and veered according to circumstances and necessity. But because basically Republican conservatism in the state of California is practically an extinct breed. But when you're talking about a national level, it's different. Her main mission is she has to convince a few thousand voters, interest voters, and 7 key swing states. And this is the Harris-Walz ticket is the most progressive since 1988. Michael Dukakis and Lloyd Bentsen lost to George Bush Jr. And she has to prove her sense of credentials. And since she chose Walz, who was more of the progressive, to basically get party unity, it was a cautious, easier approach. But the thing is, now she has to prove that she's the centrist. And the last thing that many Americans want is the Californiization of American politics. She has to shift to the center and do so credibly and in less than 90 days. It's not an easy thing, not impossible, but on his side, Trump has been struggling. Since she became the candidate, Trump has been struggling to articulate his lines of attack. He's gone personal, and the senior Republicans are saying stick to policy because from their perspective, the Democrats, they're weak when it comes to inflation in the economy. They're very vulnerable when it comes to the immigration issue. And they're also very vulnerable on Gaza, because that is one issue that has been splitting the party asunder. They're going to try to maintain unity on.
Indeed, Marco, we're understanding there are demonstrations outside the convention center in Chicago regarding Israel, Gaza. And obviously, that's Democrat supporters criticizing Kamala Harris for her stance on Israel. This is something that clearly she needs to get very clear and very quickly.
Yeah, she has to do. That's a difficult balancing act. Rhetorically, she's fully supporting the president and his position, basically saying we will support Israel with their needs. But at the same time, rhetorically, she's been far more critical of Israel than has been President Biden, trying to placate the left wing of the party. But those in the left wing of the party, originally, when she became the candidate, they thought they would put a pause. But eventually they said, no, we're going full speed with our attack. Basically, because there's a difference between word and action. Rhetorically, you're giving us what we want, but action-wise, you're not giving us what we want. So that balancing act is a very difficult one. Secretary of State Tony Blinken right now is in the Middle East. He's made several trips there. He said himself, this is the best and probably the last opportunity for a ceasefire. If you can manage to get a ceasefire and that ceasefire holds till Election Day, that'll take enormous pressure off of her. If the ceasefire is not achieved, or if it is achieved but then falls apart, that puts the pressure back on her, because the Republicans, Trump and the Republicans, are very united in their support, unequivocal support of Israel.
Marco Vicenzino, thank you very much indeed for giving us that analysis of what's at stake for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as they begin this Democratic National Convention. Marco Vicenzino, thank you for joining us very much indeed.